Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and I want to briefly talk to you about the NATO summit that is taking place in The Hague, the Netherlands, as we speak. President Trump is attending the NATO summit, and as you all know, the president has never really been very excited about NATO. He has threatened to withdraw the United States from NATO, and so this particular summit at NATO is very focused on Donald Trump. They're calling it a Trump-focused summit, and one of the most important things that they have done is kept Zelensky on the sidelines. In fact, he is not getting the main, shall we say, forum as he always did at NATO summits. So, in order not to irritate Donald Trump, even though Zelensky is going to be at the summit, he is not going to be very prominent and very visible. He's not even invited to the formal dinner, I think, at this summit. So anyway, the key issue really, there are two key issues at this summit that the NATO powers, there were 32 countries who are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, they will be discussing officially. One is obviously the sole purpose for which NATO and the West today exists, which is to protect Ukraine. So how can we fund Ukraine more and more and more? How to give more money, how to convince Donald Trump to continue to send money. So far, Donald Trump is only sending that aid which was approved by Joe Biden to Ukraine. But he is not adding any new aid, weapons, etc. so far to Ukraine. So the idea is how to continue to make sure that Donald Trump does not make too many concessions to Russia and then continues to support Ukraine. That is the NATO agenda, but the other issue is how can Europe itself use NATO as a way of providing support and security to Ukraine. There is going to be no discussions this time on fast forwarding or speeding up inclusion of Ukraine in NATO. I think the Europeans are afraid that if they push right now to somehow skip the regular guardrails and try to make Ukraine the member of NATO, it's quite possible that Trump might do something which will make it much more difficult in the post-Trump era to make Ukraine a member of NATO. So they're probably waiting till 2028, and then they will try with a new president to bring Ukraine back, Ukraine into NATO. I think that's their game plan. But the main issue besides Ukraine is Donald Trump's new demand. First, he demanded in his first term that Ukraine or that NATO countries spend 2% of their GDP on their defense. Now he has upped the ante and he says Europe must spend 5% of their defense budget, of their GDP on defense. That is a huge amount to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. He says 3.5% on hardcore defense-related issues and 1.5% on other kinds of capacity such as cyber terrorism, cyber capacity, artificial intelligence, and other things that are around defense but not necessarily defense. So basically he's asking them to move. So a smart finance minister can basically point to education and say, oh, this is all defense related, and that's how 1.5% will go. So basically, you could say that Trump is demanding that they go from 2% to 3.5% on hardcore defense related issues. The purpose for demanding more spending from Europe is because he wants to reduce America's spending on Europe's security, saying Europe is rich, Europe should take care of its own security, and the United States is therefore not going to spend more. The US is going to reduce its spending there because it is going to be spending money other places, especially in the Indo-Pacific and perhaps again in the Middle East. So that's the whole point. If Europe spends more on its defense, then the US does not need to spend so much money on Europe's security. Trump feels that Europe has exploited the United States while it has invested in its own social welfare. It has relied on the US or used the US to advance its own security. I'm not very sure, but it's also possible that Donald Trump thinks that if they spend more money, then they will also buy more US arms. So, for example, when Joe Biden was president and the Russia-Ukraine war began, all the European countries raised their budgets. And once they raised their budgets, there were massive orders for F-35s from Finland, from Germany, from Canada. A lot of NATO powers started buying American weapons. So it was good for the American defense industry that NATO countries are spending more money on defense. But lately, since both Europeans and others, including Canadians and Japanese, are upset with Donald Trump's tariff policies, Canada has basically decided not to buy the F-35 that it had placed an order for, I think over 40 or 60 F-35s. So it's quite possible that the Europeans might spend more on defense, but also spend that money shopping elsewhere or from within themselves. So instead of buying F-35s, maybe Europeans will buy more Rafale jets and Swedish jets for their air forces. So I don't know to what extent Trump's motivation is. This demand is either just to reduce Europe's dependence on the US, but I don't know to what extent it also depends on them buying US weapons. So those are the issues that will be discussed in The Hague today. Trump is already there. But of course, I think they will also discuss the Iran-Israel conflict. Many European countries are upset that Donald Trump has attacked Iran's nuclear facilities. They do not see this as a great achievement. Many of them see this as counterproductive. Of course, Britain and some other countries are quite gung-ho about it and quite happy that he did it. But some countries are. So, for example, South Korea has very clearly, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand always attend NATO summits as part of what they call as the IP4, Indo-Pacific 4. And this time, only the Prime Minister of New Zealand is attending, and the Prime Ministers of Japan, South Korea, and Australia have decided not to attend the NATO summit. While Australia has supported the attack on Iranian nuclear targets, the Australians have said that because IP4 is getting marginalized in NATO, they see no point in attending NATO. Because South Korea and Japan are not attending, and South Korea is very, very clear. They are very unhappy with this attack on Iran, and that's why they are not coming. And the Japanese are making all kinds of excuses. And one of the excuses is that the Japanese Prime Minister may not have the opportunity to meet Donald Trump. The Japanese Prime Minister was the second foreign leader to have met Donald Trump after he became president. So I don't know why he wants to meet him again, but anyway, I think there are lots of disputes on trade relations, and the US is not able to get a trade deal with Japan. So basically, Asian countries are going to bypass the Indo-Pacific countries. Japan, Australia, and South Korea are not attending this conference, NATO conference, and I think that is strategically significant. It shows that these two regions are becoming more and more apart, and partly because of the choices that President Trump is making. So anyway, this is what I wanted to share with you as a preview to the NATO summit. And I will obviously do a review once the summit is over and see if something interesting comes out of it other than the budget. There's another interesting development that Spain has got an exemption. It simply refused to spend 5% on its defense budget. They find it unrealistic. And so Spain has negotiated this with NATO, and they have given it an exemption. Otherwise, Spain was going to boycott this and basically rebel against this particular push by Donald Trump. So thank you for watching Conversations. Please like this video, press the bell icon, and subscribe to the channel and share this video with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtada Khan. Take care.